Welcome to Three Rivers Leadership. I'm your host, Kevin Trout. I am fortunate in my role as a peer advisor and group chair with Vistage Worldwide to work with people every day that have incredible life stories and lessons to share on leadership, entrepreneurship, and business successes. It's my goal in this podcast to bring you in-depth, one-on-one conversations with these fascinating, thoughtful, and highly successful executive leaders. Find out what they learned, how all of us can benefit from their experiences. So simply put, I'm on a quest to learn from the best. So in our studio today is Laura Siebold, who is the founder and president of Shine Consulting and is a certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. Laura is also the host of her own podcast, Leadership Rediscovered. Yes, she's a fellow podcast host, and she actually interviewed me about a month or so ago, and I thoroughly enjoyed our time together. So now I get to interview you.
I'm excited.
So welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here and hope I don't disappoint because you delivered such a good episode for me. So I can't match that, but I'll try.
I don't know. I think you're absolutely wonderful at what you do. So I'm really excited to chat with you about it.
Thanks. Me too.
So let's get a little bit of background on you. Where are you from originally and where did you grow up and where did you go to school?
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town outside of Dayton, Ohio, and Dayton is home of the Wright brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Invented flight and the bicycle. Not a lot of people realize the bicycle too. So everything in that area is named after the Wright brothers. So I actually went to school at Wright State University and I majored in business. I was the black sheep of my family. All the men are engineers, all the women are teachers, except for me. So I majored in business and really that led me down the road of focusing on human resources. I really liked people and I really liked business, and math is not my strong suit. So I unfortunately had to stay away from finance and accounting and all of those majors, but that landed me in human resources. And so after I graduated college, I moved to Morgantown, West Virginia, and I started my career in human resources and did that for 20 plus years.
Give us a little bit about the journey.
Yeah.
So where'd you start and where did you end up after the 20 years you were in?
Absolutely. So I started with a startup financial institution and they had about 100 employees when I began, and I knew nothing about human resources. I'll never forget, I started in November. Hadn't even technically graduated yet. I just went back for graduation, but I started in November, and I remember one of the first days I was there, they said, okay, we're going to be doing open enrollment. It's really good that you're here because we're going to do open enrollment for benefits. And I literally called one of my professors and I was like, is that where they select benefits? I don't really remember. That's about how knowledgeable I was about HR when I started. And it was such a cool opportunity. It was a small but fast growing company. And they did acquisitions. I was there for about 4 years. They did acquisitions and I got to do a little bit of everything because it was so small. So a lot of it was creating things, creating a new employee handbook, creating a new employee orientation, creating a wellness program. They were very progressive in terms of wellness and compensation and taking care of employees. So I got to create a lot of things and do a lot of really cool things, but I still felt like I really didn't know what I was doing. And I really wanted to learn from other HR professionals who had been in the business for a really long time. So I left that organization and I went to a pharmaceutical company that at the time was just based in the U.S. and Puerto Rico. And then 3 weeks after I joined, they became a global company. And so I spent, the next 14 years there, bouncing back and forth between more of the general HR work. And then I really found my passion in the talent space. So talent acquisition, talent management, talent development. I always say that's the fun part of HR. And it's really about helping people identify what they do best and then helping them get into the right roles where they can do that. And that's such a win for the employee and for the company. So that's really what I loved doing and enjoyed doing. And then eventually started to feel the itch of wanting to own my own business. Itch, craziness, I don't know, a little bit of both. And you want me to
go right into it?
Transition to that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Tell us how you ended up in your Shine Consulting.
So it was a slow evolution, but around 2018, I started feeling a little bit weary of being in the corporate world, wanting something different. I'd always wanted to own my own business. I liked business. I mean, that's why I majored in business. And so I kind of wanted that experience for myself. And I must have had a really bad day at work. I'm not sure I don't remember what happened, but I do remember I went home and I wrote on a Post-it note, May 31st, 2020, and I stuck it on my bathroom mirror. And that was exactly 2 years from the date. And it was a commitment that I was making to myself to exit the corporate world in 2 years. So
Wow.
I wasn't sure yet what I was going to do other than own my own business. I had some inklings of, I really became very passionate about coaching. And I think at the time, I just wanted to do that solely.
Yeah.
And so I just very slowly started figuring out, okay, what is it that I want to do? How am I going to make money? Unfortunately, I did have to still pay my bills and all of that. So
we all.
how do you create a profitable business, but also doing something that I loved doing and was passionate about? And so unfortunately, my date of May 31st, 2020, I didn't know that a global pandemic would have happened right before that exit date I had set for myself all the way back in 2018. So it took me a little bit longer, but eventually I was able to transition into working for myself full time, and just want to pinch myself. I feel so lucky to do it.
I love the fact that you picked a date.
Yeah.
And said, this is the date. I'm going to do something different. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And then you had to figure out between now and the time that that date arrived, what it was you were going to do.
Yeah. And I had to look at it every day. It was on my mirror.
What a great reminder. Because most people do it the other way around.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure it out, but then they don't put a due date on it,
Yes.
right? I love that.
I actually still have it on my mirror. I mean, those Post-it notes, that glue is good. But I actually just keep it there now as a reminder. This was something that I felt so strongly and so passionate about that even if I have a down day, or how it is sometimes when you're in business for yourself, you might think, gosh, did I make a mistake? Should I have stayed where I was? It's a reminder to me of that moment in time and how important this is to me.
Yeah. So I'm very familiar with the company you were with. I know several people that work with you.
Yeah.
And it is a global company. It's well known around here.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how did you come up with the name Shine Consulting?
Yeah.
And how did you get your first client?
Yeah. Woo, these are good questions. Okay. So we'll start with the name. So I am a person of faith. So the name actually comes from scripture. Matthew 5:14 is you are the light of the world. And there's certainly a religious component to that. But essentially, the basis of it is that you don't light a light or a lamp and then cover it up. You put it up on a lampstand for everyone to get the benefit of that. And so the way I think about that for each individual is that we all have strengths, we all have gifts, we all have talent.
Yeah.
And for a lot of reasons, sometimes people aren't actually able to shine that light as bright as they would like to. And so that's my job. What I feel like is important, and the work that needs to be done is just helping people access that. And it can show up in a couple different ways. It can show up individually. If I am just not in the career that's right for me, or I'm not leading in the capacity I want to, then maybe that's a situation where I would work one-on-one with somebody from more of a coaching perspective. Maybe it's a team that's not functioning to their greatest potential. That never happens, right?
Whole book about that. 5 dysfunctions of a team, right?
So it's, okay, how do we figure out how to get this team to be at their potential? And then really the bulk of my time is spent on leaders, because I'm very passionate about that topic. That's why I have a podcast on it. But helping leaders be as effective as they can be. And then from an organizational perspective, culture, because so much comes from an organization and their culture.
Yes.
And so any of those areas, to me, are areas that are diminished sometimes, that just need a little bit of spark. Yeah. And that's what I hope to bring. So that's where the name came from, Shine. And then my first client, so I did a workshop that was actually my first official thing that I did for the business. And it was originally a workshop that was geared just for women, and then I expanded the audience. And this was during the pandemic, so it was virtual because everything
was virtual then.
Yeah, but I did a workshop called Finish It, and it was really just helping people get their goals across the finish line. And so, yeah, it was really fun. We did basically how it works is we talked about the differences between a dream and a goal. And then what gets in the way? Well, first of all, how to set a goal, because I assumed everyone knows how to do that, but that's not everyone knows how to do that.
Not.
Yeah. And so I created my own goal setting model and walked people through that model. And then we talked about all the things that get in the way of achieving goals, fears, habits, things of that nature. And then we put a plan in place for each person that went through the program. And they also each got an accountability partner as they walked out of the session. And so that was a big moment for me because it was the first time I was able to do something truly under that name shine, under my own business that I was actually charging people for. And what's funny is so much of my business activities led to that moment, because if you think about, well, how do I tell people about this program? Oh, I guess I need a website. Oh, well, how do I put a website together? And what do I put on the website? There were so many things that I had to do in order to just launch that one program and communicate it. And so that's a lot of how that business actually got started, was just, well, I need headshots and I need a website and I need a social media presence and I need to figure out how to take money from people and all those important things. So that was actually the first customers I had were for that program. And then the first organizational customer I had was actually a referral from someone that I had worked with in my past in human resources that just called me and said, hey, I'm working with a leader here that wants to do leadership development work. And they asked if I knew anybody, and you were the first person to come to mind. And to this day, that's actually still how I get most of my clients.
Referrals are they're golden, right?
Yeah.
That's how I build my Vistage groups, is strictly off referrals and introductions.
Absolutely. And I've been so blessed and fortunate to work with amazing people throughout my career. And many of those people moved on to other organizations. Yeah. And so they've reached out, or I've been able to reconnect with them. And that's been really cool to get to work with people again that I really loved to work with when I was in the corporate world.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love the story. Do you mind if I dig a little deeper on something you said? You said that not everybody knows how to set a goal.
Yeah.
And that you had sort of a goal-setting formula.
Yeah.
Can you share that with us?
Yeah.
Please.
I'll try to go quick because I'm real passionate. Yeah. You just edit whatever you need to edit out. But it's called the B-STAR model. And so it's actually in the design of a star, and it's an acronym, but the B stands for believable. And I actually feel like this is something that's missing because there's a lot of good goal setting models out there. The SMART is probably the one most people know about and
SMART
use.
Goals, sure.
FAST goals, which I really like. That came out of MIT. That's a good one. But the B, the believable, that's something that I think is missing from a lot of goal setting models. And it's, do you actually believe that you can achieve this goal?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, when you think about it, right? Because a lot of times we set what I call should goals. So like, I should do this.
I'd like to.
Yeah, I should lose weight. I should eat better from a personal perspective. But I may or may not actually believe I can do it. And what's interesting to me about this whole goal process is that we actually, if we just think up a goal in our mind, we only have about an 8% chance of achieving that goal, which I think is terribly depressing and unacceptable. So
I didn't know that number.
Yeah, it's only about 8%. So if you don't even believe that you can achieve it, how likely are you to actually do it? And so, but that also comes into play in an organizational context too. Let's say I report to you and you set my goals for me for each performance year. And you say, hey, Laura, you did a great job with your sales last year. You got $500,000 in sales. And we've had some hard times and we've cut a bunch of salespeople. And now your goal is $5 million. And I'm going to be like, no way. Not happening. I don't believe that I can do that.
Yeah.
So the B stands for believable, which is almost a filter. You have to ask yourself, do I really believe or not? And how do I know I'll be successful? And then before you can even move on from there, you have to evaluate that. Because if it's a no, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Stay there and figure out why it is that you don't believe.
Stuck.
So assuming that you do believe, then the S stands for specific, which I do think is an important part of any good goal. And certainly a lot of times we set goals that are way too vague in nature, and that can trip us up a lot. The T is for time bound. And so we talked about this with a Post-it note, right?
Yes.
If we don't feel like there's a sense of urgency or any sort of deadline, then we're going to procrastinate on it. We're not going to prioritize it. So when I think about time, it's ultimately when do you want to achieve the goal? But then a lot of times, depending on how big the goal is, you might have to put some milestones along the way as well, just to kind of keep you motivated.
Yeah.
So that's the T. And then the A is accountability. So that's the secret for what actually helps people get across the finish line, is having a regularly scheduled accountability appointment with somebody else. And so again, in the corporate world or in the business world, we have a lot of built-in accountability systems. If I know that I have to go to a project status update meeting every week, or if my boss is going to ask me if I want to keep my job, there's a lot of accountability things that are in place. But if we're personally setting goals, we don't always have those. We're forced to keep ourselves accountable, which some of us are not so great at.
That's hard.
Myself included.
Yeah, it's hard for most of us, right?
Yeah. And so having that person or people, Weight Watchers, I don't know if they still do this, but used to have to go weigh in.
Yeah.
And I have seen people do some pretty drastic things prior to their weigh-in because they were like, oh, I got to go stand on that scale. So the accountability piece is huge. And then the R stands for rewarding. And I always say that's a big R and a little r. Yeah. And so the big R is the why. Why are you doing this? Why is this goal rewarding for you? What are you going to get out of it? And then the little r is how are you going to reward yourself along the way? And that just helps to keep the momentum going. So when you go through the T part, the time bound, and you're setting maybe some little milestones, what are the little rewards you can give yourself when you hit each of those milestones just to keep you motivated and to keep going?
Glass of wine. Yeah.
Not if you're trying to quit drinking, though.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so
it depends on the goal.
a chocolate bar then.
Yeah, you and I have similar rewards, Kevin.
I am so glad. I'm so glad I asked that question because that was really great.
Oh, thank you.
I love it. Hannah, what'd you think of that?
Like that? The B-Star model.
I always have to give a shout out to my producer, Hannah Phillips, who is here. She is always making us sound good, and this podcast wouldn't exist if it wasn't for her.
Yeah, she's got a tough job with me because I'm very loud and I have a lot of vocal variety. She's getting her work cut out for her today. Job, Hannah. She's a pro.
So I really love that. I mean, like you said, that's a whole workshop, but that has to be one of the main pillars of the workshop.
Yes,
it's just
absolutely.
To understand how to create a goal.
Yeah.
The believability part is the one thing that you never hear about.
You don't. And we all just kind of take that for granted. We assume that, well, of course, I believe I can achieve it. Why would I be working on it? But when you start thinking about it, honestly, a lot of times we have goals that we don't actually believe we can achieve. So that is an important first step.
So what else is in that workshop besides the goal setting model? What else do we need to know?
So they get the model, which now everyone listening to this gets the model. But the other piece is a lot of conversation and some deep dives into what holds us back. And we talk about things like fear and what are we afraid of and what's preventing us from achieving our goals. We talk about habits. So a lot of people don't realize that at least 40% of our day is just based on habit alone. And that's when we're not even consciously thinking about what we're doing. I'm sad to say that when I drove here today from West Virginia, I don't actually remember the whole drive because I used to make this drive a lot. And so my brain was downshifting, thinking about other things, doing other things. And our brain will do as much as it can to make as many things habits so that it has to expend less effort. And so that's fine if your habits are setting you up for success. But a lot of times we tend to have habits that maybe are getting in the way of our success. So we spend some time going through, okay, what are the habits that we have in place that are helping us? What are the ones that are getting in the way? And then we break down the number one biggest offender, the thing that's really most getting in our way of success. And then we reframe that habit. We redo the habit loop. So that comes from a book by Charles Duhigg called The Power of Habit, I believe it's called. And he talks about a habit loop. Yeah. And so we redo the habit loop to create a new habit that will set someone up for success instead of detract from it.
What's the number one thing that gets in people's way? Is there like one thing that you can always...
Fear.
And where does that come from? Is it from something in their childhood, or is it just how they were raised, or where do you think it comes from?
So I'm not like a neuroanatomist, but I actually am really fascinated by the brain because...
Just your opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, just my opinion. But I would say it comes from our brain. So the most primitive part of our brain is there to keep us alive and to keep us safe. And so it is constantly scanning our environment to determine whether we're in a safe or unsafe situation. And that can be protecting us from physical threats, but it also nowadays what you'll hear about is things like psychological safety.
Yeah.
So am I in a situation right now? I walked in this room today that I knew you, but then there's two other individuals in this room that I don't know. There's padded walls, slightly concerning. And my brain is quickly scanning. It's looking at each one of you in this room and trying to figure out, is this a safe situation? Is this an unsafe situation? And everything ties back to that. And so anytime we're out of our comfort zone, as an example, there's going to be little bells going off in our brain, like unsafe, unsafe. Anything that's unknown to us might feel unsafe. And so our brain is going to really resist against that because it wants to keep us safe and ultimately alive. And so fear actually dictates a lot of our behavior, and we're not often consciously aware of it because nobody likes to talk about fear.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just learned a whole lot. I want to take your workshop now.
I did. Well, was not planning on talking about this today, but I actually turned it into an online workshop that was more like a master class that people can just do at self-paced. So you can take it, Kevin, because...
So how can people take advantage of that workshop?
So my website is www.w as in West Virginia, wvshine.com. And so there's a tab on there that says finish it. And it has all the information that you could want to know about how to finish it, how to take the course and
I'm glad we took a deep dive in this because this was great. I will take your course.
Awesome.
I'm going to take the workshop.
Well, and I will say there's also, if I can just add one more thing to that, there's also a donate option on there that if people want to, if they're like, I am a goal master and I don't need this workshop, they can actually pay to have someone who is in active recovery. So I have a partnership with West Virginia Sober Living. And people are also able to donate courses to individuals in active recovery to take finish it as well. So just got to put a plug in for my friends at West Virginia Sober Living.
I love that. It's sort of giving back or paying it forward, however you want to describe that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great.
Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. So far, it's been a great interview and we're not even halfway done.
What else you got on your list?
Let's talk about leadership.
Yes.
Because that's your favorite topic,
it
I know.
It is, yes.
So share a little bit of your leadership philosophy with us.
So I'm passionate about leadership, first of all, because I think leaders are in a position of such influence and impact and can have such a positive impact and a ripple effect. But sometimes, or many times, as when I know, we hear a lot of stories of people who aren't experiencing the most positive impact from a leader.
Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah. And that goes totally against my Shine brand, as this is all about, okay, how do we get to achieving our potential and using all the gifts that we have? So I'm very passionate about leadership, and I really am passionate about a world where people enjoy going to work and don't dislike their boss and don't dislike the company they work for, but actually are able to use the gifts that they have. And so when on my podcast, as you know, I ask, what's your definition of leadership to every leader? Because what's interesting is if you go out on Amazon and search leadership, it'll return over 70,000 results. So no one person has decided or come out with this is the only way to lead or this is the only definition. It's all, once we get past the basics of managing day-to-day, leadership in my mind is very much central to the person and their individual style, their individual definition of leadership. So my definition is very simple. I think a leader is someone who is responsible for enabling the success of others. And so if you think
Great
about...
definition.
Thank you. It's pretty high level, but it encompasses all the skills that you need in order to be a great leader. So if I am focusing on the success of others, that means I am getting to know people. I'm getting to learn what it is that motivates them, what it is that helps them be successful. And I'm also finding out what's getting in the way of them being successful, because I do feel like a leader's responsibility, one of their many responsibilities, is to remove barriers.
Yes.
And so focusing on how can I help this person be the best version of themselves? If I'm leading a team and every single person on that team is better and stronger and a higher performer than I am, then I think I've been successful as a leader.
That goes right to one of the sayings we always use is a leader's responsibility is to grow their people.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that you just define what growing your people
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very selfless. It's like parenting. Once you have kids, it's not about you anymore. Nobody cares. The kids get, all the attention, and as they should. But it's about, how do I create the best experience for them? How do I create the best life for them? How do I help them be the best version of themselves? And so to me, leadership is not that different than parenting and some of those philosophies, but really, how do I get to know each of these individuals and help them achieve their goals, help them to be successful, and however term they define success for them.
So the other person in the room today is Aaron Watson. He's the CEO of Piper Creative, and he has 2 young children. So were you listening to that?
Yeah. Do you get a sick day as a parent? No, nobody cares. Exactly.
So that's so good.
It's a very selfless job.
For sure. So let's talk about the role that you're in now as a coach / consultant.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing this? How long has Shine Consulting been around?
Well, on paper since 2018, because when I went home and wrote that Post-it note, the next thing I did was apply for my business license. So on paper,
you already had a name at that time?
That took a little while, but yeah. It more full-time since 2021.
All right, so it's been a few years.
Yeah.
What has the last few years meant to you?
Oh my gosh.
As a coach and as a consultant, what have you gotten out of it?
Yeah, more than I deserve, honestly.
Great answer. I love that.
It has been such a blessing, because I tell people all the time, I actually feel like I enjoy it too much. Like, some things should not be allowed, because I really do love what I do. And I've had the opportunity to work with the most amazing people and get to learn. I love to learn. And so the cool thing is I get to go into so many different organizations, and tying back to my roots of business, I really do love business. So I'm getting to learn not only about the people in those organizations, but how their business runs, what the business model is. And that's so interesting to me too. So I loved getting to learn about that. I love getting to work with amazing people, and I really like to help people. I remember when I was first starting out, I told a friend of mine what I was going to do. And he said, well, what's your why? Why are you doing it? And I said, I like to help people. And he goes, you can't say that. So cliche. And I was like, we really do like to help people. That does matter to me. And that is very rewarding work. And so I just feel very fortunate and blessed that I get to do work every day where I am helping people. And I do get to take just a tiny little part in knowing that maybe they're just slightly more effective, or they've achieved a goal that they otherwise thought impossible. Just, I get to take a little teeny tiny part in that. And I really love that.
You're living the leadership life. It's exactly what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So even though that's your why, doesn't matter what people think about it. As long as it's authentic to yourself, that's the only thing that's really important, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're living your leadership life. I love that.
Thank you.
So any books or mentors in your life that have really helped define your leadership style?
Yeah. So
and feel free to drop some names so that they know.
Sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so many. We'll do the books first. That's easier, I think. And I love to read and I love books. So Dare to Lead by Brene Brown.
Yeah.
I love that book. Anything by Simon Sinek, I think, is really good. There's a book that came out many years ago by Dan Pink called Drive. And I really like that book. It talks a lot about motivation. What else? I brought a list with me because I didn't want to forget. It's just like an Oscar speech. Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Principles by Ray Dalio. I mean, there's so many. I buy probably 3 books a week, but I do not read at that pace. So
the stack gets taller and taller over time.
And podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. So I would like to think that I have learned from every leader I've ever worked for. And sometimes that was what to do, and sometimes that was what not to do. Mm-hmm. And honestly, some of the worst leadership experiences I've been exposed to, I actually learned the most sometimes from those people. And I would be angry if I told myself in that moment, this is good for you, because it very much did not feel good for me in the moment. But honestly, I've learned from every single person that I've ever worked for. I will give a shout out to Beth Pratt. That is someone who I worked for 3 different times. And she was really good about exposure. And she would send me to meetings that she could go to, but felt like it would be better to give me exposure. And I remember one time I worked for a company for about 4 years, and I was meeting with a senior leader, and he said, "Who are you? Like, are you new here? And when did you start?" And I said, "No, I've worked here for 4 years." And he said, "How have I never met you before?" And I said, "Well, I used to work for people that they wanted the credit. They wanted to be in the meeting. They wanted to be on the agenda. And now I work for someone who doesn't care as much about that. And she wanted me to have the opportunity and the exposure." So I think I learned a huge lesson from her. The other thing that she did is if there was a mistake on the team, she would take the blame for it. But if there was a success on the team, she would give credit to that person and she wouldn't take it for herself, even if really she was responsible for the success. And I really tried to carry that forward with me as well. And if someone said, "Oh, Laura, this is a stunning PowerPoint presentation," that I would be sure to say, "Thank you. Caitlin did that PowerPoint presentation," or "Ashley did that PowerPoint presentation. It wasn't me." And they weren't in the room, so they would never have known if I had given them credit or not. But that was an important lesson for me.
That's a key attribute of real leaders is when they accept the blame, even though it's not their fault, but they also give credit, even though it might belong to them. They're giving it to their people. The opposite of them are the micromanagers or bad managers that you don't want to be around.
No, you don't.
I had a very similar story to what you, right? I used to say I never met a business person I didn't learn something from. And I truly believe that. And I learned some really great leadership lessons from some of the people I work for. Dick Bear is one of them. And then I had some really terrible leaders. I just can't wait to get away from this person. Right?
But you still learn something, even if it's what not to do.
But I've left companies as a result, right? Where when I had my own company, I dropped some manufacturers because they just, it wasn't that they had a bad product. They had a terrible leadership, a toxic environment. I don't have the patience for this.
Nobody wants to be a part of that. And when you run your own business, you get to choose whether you want to work with those clients or not down the road. I mean, maybe your first engagement, you're locked in, but then if it's repeat business, you can decide.
There's a couple of companies I dumped just because of that. Just because of that.
Absolutely.
It had nothing to do with the product.
Well, I'm a certified Clifton Strengths coach. And so Gallup is the organization that owns Clifton Strengths, that product. And they do a ton of research on employee engagement, well-being, and things of that nature. And through their research, they've determined that a leader accounts for 70% of the variance in someone's engagement. That they're direct. The person they report directly into accounts for 70% of the variance in their employee engagement, which is huge. And people leave people.
That's right. I did.
Yeah, I have. So, and people have left me. So that, of course, I knew that statistic. So I'm like, oh gosh, what did I do wrong?
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was 70%, but
70%.
I could totally believe that.
Mm-hmm. There was another study that just came out and said that someone's boss has a greater impact on their mental health than their therapist or spouse/partner. That's huge.
Because you're getting a paycheck from that person.
Yeah, and you're spending a lot of time with them, too.
Yeah.
More time than some of those other people.
Yeah. Wow. They have so much impact on an individual's life and their engagement and happiness, like you said, right?
Yeah. And that's why I'm passionate about it, because I think a lot of leaders don't understand what impact they have. And a lot of times there's a disconnect between their intent and their impact.
Yep.
And they think that they're having a positive impact, but they're actually not. And they don't have that awareness. And so I don't think most people get up in the morning and say, just going to hope I ruin Kevin's day today. I mean, I really don't believe that. There are some people, but most people, I think, are really trying to do their best, but they don't always have the impact that they think they're having. And so I think that awareness is key.
I totally agree with you. And really, so much of it comes down to just semantics. It's saying the right thing, the intent versus impact. We talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
In Vistage and Predictive Index. And here's a simple example I just got from one of our Vistage speakers. He said, you have this conversation in a performance review, and it sounds like this. Hey, I want to talk about the things that you're doing really well, and I want to talk about some things that need improvement. And he changed it. He said, hey, we're going to talk about the things that you're doing really well, and there are some things that need to evolve.
Yeah, but how it gets received.
Big difference in improvement versus evolve. Because improvement says you suck.
Yes.
And evolve doesn't say you suck. It just says, hey, it can get better, no matter how good it is.
Yeah.
And that change of one word, the impact is totally different.
It is. Yeah. And all the experiences that the employee sitting across from you has had prior to sitting where they are now shapes how they interpret that message.
Exactly. It's how that's how they receive information, and it's not always positive.
No. I mean, I've had individuals that have worked for me that have been laid off before. And so it's like, can we meet on Thursday? They're like, oh my gosh, are you firing me? I'm like, no, I just want to talk to you about your lunch order for the day. I mean, nothing crazy, but there was this paranoia, and that was something that happened before we even worked together. But that was still something that I needed to be aware of and manage to, because it shaped how they perceived my messages to them.
That same speaker brought that subject up as well.
Really?
He said, when you tell somebody, hey, let's meet at such and such time to chat, you got to tell them what the conversation's going to be about. And it's part of what, otherwise they're going to do exactly what you described. And he talked about that as well. So, yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. Hey, any other mentors you want to give a shout out?
Ed Copus, that was somebody else that I worked very closely with in HR. I'm so glad you asked, because I was just sitting here thinking, I can't believe I didn't say Ed's name. And I learned so much from Ed. He was just a very authentic person, a very humble person, and was someone who would really raise the confidence level of everybody that worked on his team and really saw the good in them and encouraged them to really just bring their authentic self to the table. But he also has the highest emotional intelligence of probably anybody I know. And he knew how to read people and how to have more productive and collaborative relationships. So I was really grateful for the time that I got with him as well. And then someone way back from my past, from my first job, was a gentleman by the name of John Fahey. And I loved working with him. Frank Vitale, too. He's in your Vistage group. So Frank and John I worked with very early in my career, and I learned a lot from them as well. I remember Frank used to send me to conferences. I don't think he'll get in trouble for this now, because neither one of us work at the company anymore. But he would send me to conferences that he would tell me, this isn't something that you're going to use here, but it'll help you down the road in your career. And I always really appreciated and respected that.
Shout out to Frank Vitale, fellow Vistage member, one of my groups. Yeah, he's really good at what he does. Okay. So here's one of my favorite questions. If you delivered a commencement address today, what would your message to the college graduating class be?
So this is timely because I have two nieces getting ready to graduate high school. Yeah, so I know it's top of mind for them. I think a couple things. I would say take the time to really explore who you are, and not from a pressure perspective of you got to figure it out by tomorrow. And I think it's hard when we put a lot of pressure on kids. My son's a freshman in high school. He's already taking SATs. I'm like, my gosh, why do we do this so early? I mean, I have to remind him to put deodorant on still. So it's like, geez, we put a lot of pressure on kids to have it all figured out. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? You have to figure that out by the time you're 16, 17. And so not from a pressure perspective, but really take the time to just get to know who you are. What are your gifts? How can you have the biggest and most positive impact on this world? And then I would say from there, chase experiences, chase learning opportunities instead of chasing money. And I know that's hard, especially individuals maybe that are graduating college right now and they have student debt and all these bills to pay. I totally get that. But I think if you can focus on, again, what opportunities are out there where I can add the most value, where I can use the gifts that I have to the best of my ability, and I can learn a lot. I can be exposed to a lot of different things. I think you're going to live a much more rewarding and truly rich life versus just chasing a financial opportunity.
I agree with you. My theory is pursue success and the money will flow to you.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's how it's worked in my career.
For me too.
Yeah. A lot of times I was just tapped on the shoulder for opportunities, and I said yes, even if I was like, I don't really know if I want to do this, but I'll try it and see what happens. And I've been fortunate that I have done work that I've loved to do and then have also been financially rewarded. But I think it's because I was doing what I was meant to do. I was doing what I was passionate about.
Yeah.
And therefore I was doing my best work.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're right where you're supposed to be, right?
Yes, exactly. Where can I shine the brightest? That's the commencement address. Figure out where you can shine the brightest.
Oh, tied it right into your company. I love that.
It doesn't mean moonshine, even though I'm in West Virginia. That's not what it means.
So I want to circle back to that a little personally.
Yeah.
When you were a child, adolescent, what did you think you would be when you grew up?
Yeah, it depends on the age. That fashion designer was a big one for a long time. But then I would say middle school to high school, I actually really wanted to be a stockbroker. That was and I majored in financial services, which was a really cool major. It was a lot of insurance, investing.
Yeah.
It was part of the business school. But unfortunately, math is just not my strong suit. So I changed my major to management. But yeah, I really wanted to be a stockbroker.
And here you are as a leadership coach.
Yes, not a stockbroker. Although I still will every once in a while do a little Charles Schwab investing on my own just to have a little fun.
Well, what do you do for fun? Any hobbies?
Yeah. Well, right now, my son is a freshman in high school and he plays baseball. So a lot of my hobbies are around really just hanging out with him. And because he's in high school, it's like that countdown has started for me. So when I'm not working, I'm trying to spend as much time with him as I can, but really enjoy watching him play baseball. I'm a pretty active person. So anything that you get to move around and have a little fun in the process, any kind of game like tennis, pickleball, things like that. I enjoy doing, traveling, being outside. So just being with family.
So how long have you lived in Morgantown?
So actually don't live in Morgantown anymore. That's where I moved when I first came to West Virginia, but I live in a little town called Shinston, West Virginia, which is about 45 minutes south of Morgantown. And I live on a farm.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Does Shinston have an exit off of 79?
They do. Yeah.
That's why I recognize the name.
Yeah.
I used to go to Charleston where I had an office.
You went up and down 79 a lot.
All the time.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I recognize Shinston.
Yeah.
So you have is it a working farm?
It is a working farm. It's a cattle farm. Yeah.
Really?
Lots of animals. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. I grew up watching Little House on the Prairie. So I'm really just living that dream now. And the character's name was Laura, one of the characters. So I mean, that makes it even better. I'm really living that dream.
That's funny. All right, so last question.
Yeah.
What is the most important lesson, whether it's in life or business, that you've learned that you would want to share with others that we haven't talked about
Just
yet?
one. We actually did talk about it, but I'm going to bring it back up. And it's just understanding the role that fear plays in our life. And it's not something people like to talk about, but fear is really at the root of what gets in the way of us going after the things that we really want and being the kind of people that we want to be. If you kind of break it down, I mean, we're all afraid of something. It's not always the same things, but at the end of the day, it actually controls our behavior a lot more than people realize. And so I think if people took the time to really understand themselves, and I guess that would be the other important lesson that I've learned, is that it's human nature. It's a lot easier for us to point out the flaws or the weaknesses of somebody else or how they could evolve, improve, instead of holding up the mirror and looking at ourselves. And I think if we all took a little bit more time to build our own self-awareness around where could I be better, where could I grow, and that takes a lot of vulnerability and courage to do that work. But I think we would be living in a very different world. And I think the business world would operate a lot differently if we were all more focused on how can we personally be better and where can we grow and where does fear play into our life, as opposed to being frustrated and angry and offended by everyone that we interact with. Because those are people who also have fears and they're just trying to do their best too.
Yeah. That's really, you talk about habits, and we have a term for it we call rituals, right?
Yes.
It's a new term, but it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? And you have to be careful that you have the right habits, not the wrong ones.
Exactly.
Or the right rituals, not the wrong rituals.
Yeah.
Right? But I think your definition of fear and how it impacts us, that was spot on. And it's probably more than people actually give any thought to what fear does to them.
Yeah. I mean, when I first started my business, I can't tell you how many people responded in a negative way of like, oh my gosh, what are you going to do about benefits? I was like, that's the first thing people think about? I mean, I know it's important, but it was, what if it fails? How are you going to? There were so many things that people would say to me that it was actually them projecting their fear onto me. And I was like, not that I didn't have my own fears. So I was like, no, thanks. You can have your fears back because I've got enough of my own. And it was a really interesting time of my life where I was surprised that not more people were like, congratulations, that's so awesome. I'm so happy for you. I mean, I definitely had those people too, but I would say it was like 20 to 30% of that. And the rest of it was more of a like, oh, are you just going to do this until you find a corporate job? I'm like, no, this is the job.
And so you find a real job, right?
Exactly.
Find a real job.
Like, it was just really interesting to me just to hear people's reactions, and what would come out was oftentimes their fear of they were trying to put themselves in my shoes, and they would literally say, I could never do that. Well, you can't.
There are people out there that want you to be successful, just not more successful than them.
Yes, that too.
Right?
That too. Yeah.
So go ahead and be successful. Just don't do better than I am.
Yeah.
All right. This was a great interview. You have so much great information to share. I love it.
Thanks, Kevin.
Are you ready for the lightning round?
I'm so excited about the lightning rounds. Bring it on.
So Laura interviewed me on her podcast, and she hit me up with this lightning round at the end, and I'm like, oh, I've got to do the same thing to her. So here's some open-ended questions, and see what you can do with these. One sentence that tells your life story.
Just trying to figure it out.
Fondest memory from your childhood.
Oh my gosh, probably when I got a Cabbage Patch doll for Christmas. Now everyone knows how old I am.
What is your secret talent?
My secret talent? I once played the role of Liesel on The Sound of Music. I was a singer.
Whoa.
Yeah, not so much anymore. I'm retired, but yes, I could sing.
Nice. What season best fits your personality?
Summer.
Who was your hero when you were growing up?
Who was my hero? Michael Jackson.
For what do you feel most grateful for?
I would say my family, my faith, and just the opportunity to do the work that I love to do.
You did a great job answering those lightning round questions.
Yikes. I'm not too good on the fly, so we'll see. Feel free to cut that out if you need time.
I didn't send those questions in advance.
I know. It's good.
Well, I just want to say this has been a great show, Laura. Thank you so much. This has been Laura Siebold, president of Shine Consulting. So how can people connect with you?
Yeah. So my website has all of my social links too, but the website is just www.wv, as in West Virginia, shine, shine.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, but LinkedIn's usually the better social platform.
So you're everywhere.
I'm everywhere. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
So this show is brought to you by Vistage Worldwide, the largest global peer advisory and coaching organization for CEOs, entrepreneurs, and executives. We now have 45,000 members worldwide in 38 countries. I also want to give a shout out to my producer, Hannah Phillips, and also Aaron Watson, the team from Piper Creative who put this podcast together. They do an awesome job. You can learn more about Vistage by visiting our website, vistage.com, and you can find all of this show's past episodes at threeriversleadership.com. So stay tuned for more great leadership stories from more awesome people like Laura. See you again next time here on Three Rivers Leadership.